Podcast time.
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? All right. I think everything's working well. So I think the first thing we got to get the elephant in the room out of here. Yes, we don't live in the same household. Yes, we're not wearing masks. Yes, we've had COVID tests in the last 5 days.
Yes,
we
we
were
did.
both negative. So all good. So let's just continue that. Well, it's not me this time.
Oh, there we are. Oh, my God. You've got to be kidding me. We really... Welcome, by the way. Try this again. Welcome to the Gentleman of the Jerk. I have no idea why it is that we can continually cannot get through a single one of these episodes without some major audio problem. Anyway, this is our first time here on YouTube. We've decided to move the show over from Facebook, and we are going to broadcast directly to YouTube going forward from this point. I guess this is going to be our thing, guys. We're just going to have an issue with audio or visuals or something every single time we go live. It's just the craziest thing.
You know, that's okay. I'd rather have an issue with audio than, content, because I know our content's amazing. So, we're good there. Hey, what the hell? If they can't hear me, it's still amazing.
The content's going to be good because I'm here today.
Yes.
That's right. That's what we're hoping for. So,
and for the record, for today, I am Breonna Taylor.
That's right. We talked about that before we went on. So as you can see, if you were paying attention to the channel or the description of tonight's video, we brought Rashawn on specifically tonight to talk about the state of civil unrest in our country, what led to the Black Lives Matter movement, how he feels about his role and what his life is like in modern America, and ultimately we're going to talk about what we're hoping to see in the future from both sides, from the point of view of two 40-year-old white men, also from the view of who looks like about 25-year-old black man, what his idea for the future is.
He's older than both of us, for the record.
Is that true?
No.
Like Tupac said, I'm in my 30s, so I'm no longer a threat.
Yeah, there you go. Well, actually, since we're going to jump right into it, why don't you give us a quick introduction of who you are and why you were so excited, which you were. We've been talking about getting him on for several weeks. Why you wanted to be on the show.
And he needs to make it better than mine. Here you go.
Yes, please. Yes, go.
So, again, my name is Rashawn Smith, but today I'm Breonna Taylor. Let's say her name. The reason why I'm here today is because, just to say it, the show needs a little bit of diversity. However, I want to be able to get some things across. There's certain things that are happening in our daily climate that you don't have the correct answers to, and how the state of things are currently going. Hopefully I can speak to those things and voice from the perspective of a black male in today's society. Hopefully we can touch some subjects and we can get some of the inconsistencies out of the way.
Sure. And so obviously this did not start with George Floyd. This has been an issue that has been going on for a number of years.
Yep.
When because I've heard a number of anecdotal stories. I've got friends that have told me their stories. I've seen things through media. At what point in your life, and I don't know if it was childhood or later in adulthood, at what point were you aware of the disparity, specifically as it is to policing in America? When were you aware of it? Did you have a conversation with somebody at some point in your life? Like, how did you become open to this, what the state of things are today?
So I've kind of, so people don't realize I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. So I'm a product of number one the 80s, of the Reagan era. I've grew up during the Giuliani and Bloomberg eras, where you had I want to say was the 94 crime bill.
Okay. So this is a good one. He needs to talk about this.
So
it's important.
I grew up in that era of the 94 crime bill. I've dealt with the stop and frisk. I've dealt with Amadou Diallo. I've dealt with Sean Bell. Those were the first instances where I've had come across police brutality and things like that. I've been subject to, again, the stop and frisk situations and things like that, just being a black male in the inner cities, and being pulled over for those situations as well.
So you told me a story once about you getting stopped, and you getting stopped just because of your brother, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you got stopped. You've never done anything wrong.
No.
You get stopped with your brother.
Yes.
And you get questioned.
Yes.
So how did that make you feel? How did you feel when that happened?
So number one, it makes you feel like you're less of a person, because your record doesn't speak for itself as what you've given to that community at that given point of time. So pretty much, even if you didn't give something that was into that community, it was just that you were put in this box that, because of your association, of knowing people that have done things in their neighborhood that were, considered, terrible at that time, that you are a product of that. So that is one of those issues where a lot of the politics and the other things of your environment comes into play.
So would you say you were in a situation where, yes, you knew people who did things that were wrong?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
You didn't.
I did.
But you were put in that same box with them. And you were in a position where people said, or people thought, or people recognized that, yep, he probably did something wrong, even though he never did something wrong.
Exactly. So to give you guys a little bit of story, I'm gonna make this one quick. There was a situation that happened when I was a kid. My brother, of course, knowing my brother and the things that he did as a kid, what kid wasn't pushing the envelope at that time. My brother, he ran with a certain group of people that he didn't need to run with at that time. But anyway, there was an issue where my brother and one of his friends, allegedly, let's just put that in there, allegedly, took the keys away from a laundromat owner, and they allegedly opened up all of the laundromat washer machines and took all of the coins, allegedly. So the guy, he saw me and my friends, who at that time did nothing wrong. We weren't doing anything wrong. We were just kind of hanging out, and he pointed at me and he said, "There's the guy." And I look up and I notice he's talking to my mother, and my mother walks over and she accosts me because she thought it was me that did something wrong, but it wasn't me. And at that moment, my brother walks around with his friends, and he stops and he's like, "No, wait, it wasn't him. It was that one." And as you would notice, like I have braids at that time. Well, I have dreads now, but at that time I had braids. My brother, he had just a regular haircut. And that was the thing that distinguished me and my brother. And because I knew growing up, I would continuously get accused for things because of that, I kind of changed. I had to adapt to my circumstances. So I had to think different, I had to look different, and I had to not make myself a product of that environment. So I had to switch things around so I didn't have those issues or those identifications.
So let me ask you this. Okay, so that's, I mean, I can understand what you're saying completely. The idea that it's easy to be picked out of a lineup. It's easy to be blamed for something you didn't necessarily do. At what point hold on. I want to ask a very specific question. Okay. When that was going on, at that age, was that more for you a sense of this is how life is? Or did you find yourself already getting angry about it? Is it more of an acceptance? Is it more of a frustration? Like, how did it feel? Like, I understand you went through it, but how did it feel for you?
It was definitely frustrating because you are put into a situation where this is now going to become the new norm. It doesn't matter how good of a student you are, a scholar, whatever it is, how good of a person that you are within your community. That once that gets out, that you've had an issue within your neighborhood, that record kind of sticks with you. And the only way to kind of get away from that is to move out of that community, which is very difficult for people within my community to do. We don't have those
resources.
We don't have those resources. And even if we do have those resources, we don't know that those resources are there
right.
to move yourself forward.
The access is there.
The access, that equity, that stuff, it's not there. Like saying, I've had a academic advisor tell me that there was no reason for me to even apply to colleges, given the neighborhood and the things that I grew up in, and it was a waste of time.
Wow.
So when you have people in those certain roles who are telling a youth that there's no way out, it really affects the whole situation, the whole community and things like that.
And what you're talking about is, I think the hardest thing that most white people have to understand is the idea of institutionalized racism. That's exactly what that is.
That is exactly what that is. That is that.
So you said earlier, and I tried to cut you off, and you did your normal read the jerk thing. You said you understand. When he's talking about what he said, you said you understand. I don't think you and I will ever understand that.
Sure.
And I think that's a blessing for us. That's a gift for us, but that's kind of, that's insane that we don't understand. I mean, why does he have to understand what we don't? You know what I mean? It's crazy.
And that is where the power of the privilege comes in. Yeah. So that's one of those things you're born. And again, you want to talk about that? It's you're born.
But you're right. I mean, there's a lot of things about me that I can't change. There's a lot of things about you can't change. Yeah. And the things that are about me that I can't change give me an advantage over you. That's not okay.
True.
So I don't know if you know some background about Rashawn and I. So Rashawn and I work together. We've worked together for 2 different stints for about 5 years now. We've gone on vacations together. We've had great times together, hung out together. He is one of the most gifted technicians I've worked with. So Rashawn is one of our Acura master technicians. He is also NSX certified. He is certified to work on $200,000 cars. This guy is highly qualified. He's highly, highly skilled, and he's able to do anything he needs to do with those vehicles. And in the field he is chosen, he is one of the best. I believe in that field, he is not scrutinized for who he is. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Well,
okay, correct me if I'm wrong.
I could definitely correct you.
Now you wouldn't say I would.
So people, so no.
You and I will stand up for him, and I shouldn't have to, but I will stand up for him at any moment because I know and I trust and I know that he will do the right thing and he will take care of somebody. 100%.
But so that's the thing, is for you to trust, to know that I'm going to do the right thing, is what the problem is. That you shouldn't have to think about trusting that it is the right thing. It's just to understand that you shouldn't have to defend me being the person that I am,
right.
And just knowing that I don't hold the ill will towards anybody. I shouldn't be considered a threat or anything of that matter because of who I am and the color of skin that I have, and the amount of education. So again, like, yes, I am a master tech. I love it. I am an NSX master tech. I'm probably one of the first people to ever take one of those cards apart and put it back together. And yes, all of those accolades are wonderful for me, but there's so many people within my community that don't have those accolades or don't have those opportunities to get to that. You know, they don't know that there is a certain light at the end of the tunnel for them.
How do we get there? How do we get there?
Equity. I think equity, inclusion. I don't even think we hear the argument about the diversity, equity, inclusion, and things like that. But okay, we just gotta. I think what we need to do is get away from the diversity thing, because we tend to just deal with that part of how can we get people into that environment. I think what we need to do is we need to show the inclusion, the inclusiveness, and we need to help or show how to build the equity of it. Once we can get to that point where we can show some sort of value and also some sort of ownership, things will change. Because I know me owning something, I don't want it to go to waste. And I know I'm not going to have to push and put myself into certain situations where I'll wind up destroying what I have, you know. And speaking to some of these riots and things that's kind of going on now, if you had some individuals like me, or just anyone within the minority community, to understand that they is something that they're destroying, that they own, we wouldn't have the rioting, the looting, and things that are like that are happening. But you can also speak to a certain other situation with that. A lot of these Black Lives Matter protests I'm speaking from what I've noticed and what I've seen. This has nothing to do with Breonna Taylor. This has nothing to do with Ahmaud Arbery. Has nothing to do with George Floyd. I think it's gotten to a situation where you just have a bunch of pissed off individuals who are upset that certain things are being taken away from them. Their rights and their liberties are being taken away from them. And the argument is kind of getting lost.
Yeah, I'm gonna pause you on that thought real quick, because the last thing you just said there, I'm gonna take issue with. I don't think people of black and brown color believe that they had anything taken away from them. I think the issue is it was never given. They've never had it.
Okay, and that's
a different thing.
Let me say that. I'll join that with you. You're right, and maybe I did misspeak a little bit on that. That is correctly right. We haven't been given the opportunity, but not only given the opportunity, we haven't been shown, or we haven't been told that there is that opportunity. That opportunity wasn't just, it wasn't there. It's there, but how do we know that opportunity is there for us if, we don't have the right questions or the right, the ways to ask for that,
So,
Right. Yeah.
I got two questions for you.
Okay.
As a successful black man,
To a degree.
a pretty successful black man. You've done pretty well for yourself. You've come up from where you started.
Mm-hmm.
You've moved up from where you started.
Yeah.
You see these protests on the TV. You see what's going on in the protests. How does it feel as a successful black man to see those protests, and how do you feel about joining those protests? As a successful black man, does it give you pause when you think about joining those protests, or because of what you personally could lose, or do you just say, screw it, I'm in there?
No, so think about it. Yes, I do pause. The reason why I pause is because I have to think about the fact that it's not only me that's being affected by these protests or me joining one of the protests. I have to also think about some of those liberties and things that I do currently have as, you would say, a successful black man.
I believe you're a successful person.
That will be taken away from me in the heartbeat. You see what I'm saying? Just because of the association. However, you have to also understand, now there's a lot of minority and black police officers. And let me back up and say, I'm not saying that, that policemen and whatever, they don't care about Black lives or anything like that. You know what? They do. The argument is, we're sitting here, we're arguing semantics, and the people that are actually supposed to be there to help us, they're not helping us because they are not being allowed to help us in the way that they need to help. And this is across the board, While we sit and fight, the hungry gets fat, the rich gets fatter.
So do you think they can't?
The same policeman that I can, say for instance, I go to one of these marches and I decide I want to talk to one of these black officers that I see that are on the front lines. I can have that conversation with them like, hey, dude, I understand you have a life that you have to, you have your things within your life that you have to deal with. And we understand that this is a job. We know you're a black man first. We know you're a black woman first. As I sit there and have those conversations with them, you'll have a white male or a white female tell me, no, don't talk to that pig. No, don't talk to that officer. The reason why is because what they see first, they see that blue. You see what I'm saying? But it is not blue lives against black lives. There's no such thing as blue lives unless the police officers are a bunch of Smurfs. Right?
You're right. You're right.
Let's just take away the whole blue lives and the black in the black lives thing at that moment. What we need to speak to each other is on the realms of humanity. Dude, what you're doing and how you're reacting to people out here is wrong. And that is on both sides of the coin. There's both sides of that line. How we are reacting towards everything. The people that are in power, they're sitting there, and this is a part of their whole scheme. They know what they're doing. Keep us blinded to what's really going on. And again, this is how I see it, and this is how I feel about it. I'm not trying to tell people what they should see and how they should feel. Yes, if you want to go down there and march and scream to the top of your lungs or whatever you want to do, I am not dismissing that. If you want to be out there and say all lives matter and things like that, just understand what you're saying and when you're saying it, because you're literally talking about your neighbors, your friends, your family, that all lives matter, but that's the key. But you're not adding the rest of those people to it. It's like saying, I don't, my family is okay, so I really don't care. So whenever you have a person that says Black Lives Matter, and then you would say, well, but see, what you're doing is you're showing your privilege. and that is at that moment and period of time you shouldn't do that.
So I want to touch on a couple of different things you said real quick. So at one point you had made a comment about when you first brought up looting and some of the rioting that's occurring, not the protesting, which that's one of the biggest issues I think we have specifically with the white community and their adverse reaction to what's going on is they lump it all into one thing. The protesting is the looting is. Right, that's the problem, right? So when you first brought it up, you talked about how in order for there to be, and I'm paraphrasing you to a certain extent and maybe reading into it, but you kind of said something to the effect of, in order to find equality, you have to have wealth. And you didn't use the word wealth, but this idea of finding a balance and finding equality, not just in the view of skin color, but also in the idea of ownership, and also because you talk about how the destruction's, not happening to the black and brown businesses necessarily, but rather they're going after institutionalized things. Now, what I want to speak to about that is what I've recognized here in the Syracuse community. Now, you guys are in Seattle, which is a hotbed for protest. The Pacific Northwest in general. Obviously, we know what's going on in Portland right now. Seattle just made the news again with a major live riot broadcast on national TV.
Yes, 21 officers were injured, and that was the big headline. There wasn't any headline about the people who were injured. The protest, it was just 21 officers were injured. That was the only thing that mattered, and that's not okay.
Yeah. So I'm gonna branch into two directions real quick. So the first one that I want to talk about is when the first nights of protest happened. The first night of protest that we had here in Syracuse. There was some damage done to local businesses in the city limits. And I believe, if I recall, it was a handful of businesses, but the majority of them were black and brown owned. And so that was the argument that came out of this, and it was the same thing in Minneapolis. It was the same thing in Chicago. It was the same thing in Seattle. Wherever you saw, there was a lot of black and brown businesses owned, and I cannot speak to every one of them, but I do know this. When it happened here in Syracuse, and I spoke to the business owners and some of the members of the Black Lives Matters community here, is that those businesses were targeted for a very specific reason, because those were members of the black community that had achieved a modicum of status, a modicum of wealth, a modicum of success, and instead of turning around and presenting their prosperity to the black community, they moved out of the city, they went to the suburbs, they bought their big house, and they basically live off of the income, the retail income of the black and brown community without giving anything back. And so they were targeted specifically for that purpose, because I think, and I cannot speak for how people in this situation must feel, but it's almost like a betrayal. It's almost like, well, here was our shot, and you were the beacon of hope for our shot, and then you just left us. It was almost like like turning coat and joining the enemy kind of thing.
What you're talking about is, so in my community growing up, we used to call that the crab mentality. So the reason why we say it's a crab mentality is because once we have an individual within our community that find a way out, you always have that negative portion of it trying to pull them back in. But what you don't understand is, in order for us to gain that equity and to gain that wealth of things, we need to push ourselves forward. But at the same time, we need to go back to our communities and bring them up with us. Now, there's a problem with that, because we're not allowed to do that given certain standards of things that those individuals and those communities have to deal with. They have a lot of things that are attached to them where they can't better themselves. So regardless if we even try to, we can't help them push themselves forward because of the institutional situations that have presented themselves for them. Case in point, I don't know too much about the whole, let's talk about the whole Nipsey Hussle thing. Now, if you guys know anything about Nipsey Hussle, he was a Crip. He was also a rapper, and he had a store in Crenshaw in California. one of the people that wound up allegedly, let's just say allegedly, because we don't know, allegedly killing him was one of his old friends. And the reason that was said, the reason why he was killed was because Nip told him that you can't be around me because of the things that you're doing. And he retaliated against him because of that. So again, that is and Nipsey lost his life because of that. So that is one of those, we call it the crab mentalities, where you pull a successful person within your community down, because if you don't want to help me, I'm going to ruin everything that you have. But this is where we get lost, because we think about the whole thing. I want to say Paul Mooney said it better. We can't give those N-words nothing. And this is how people tend to see people within the Black community. If you do give them equity, they're going to ruin it.
Right.
But that is incorrect. That is incorrect. What we need to do is we need to show people how to build that equity, go back into our communities and show them there is another way. You see what I'm saying? You need
absolutely.
to show them. And if you can do that, we will build equity. And and this is why I say I'm more concerned with what I can build within my community as far as ownership. Right. I don't care about the diversity thing. I don't really care too much about the inclusion thing. And I say equity because once you have that equity, you have that diversity, you have that inclusion. You see what I'm saying? Once you can bring them to the table, and once they can have a voice at that table, not just bring them to that table, but have a voice at that table, then we can really have a discussion about what is right and what is wrong within these communities.
Right.
It's not going to be.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right in what you're saying, but you made another good point a minute or two ago about how there's a lot of people, Paul Mooney, you brought up, that they don't want anybody in the Black and brown community to have anything. There is the established. Actually, let me just say
establishment.
The white racist establishment, not the average white man that benefits or white woman that benefits from privilege, but the actual racist establishment, which there are plenty of those people in power that are employers, that are politicians, that are civic leaders. So those people, whoever they are, at whatever level they're at, those people do not want to allow for upward mobility for the Black and brown community en masse. They want to hold everybody back regardless. What they do, I think, promote are the and I will use the term appropriately, I think here, are the token success stories. They want the token success stories so that they can market those success stories and say, see, everything's fine, everybody's building up. So if that language and that narrative is allowed to continue, I don't believe we're ever going to see change. And we can talk all day long.
That is perfect that you said that. And that brings back to that whole point of me being that successful Black person. Every white person that I know, every white friend that I know, they consider me to be successful because of the environment that I came out of. But me personally, I don't see it as a success. I see it as me grasping the things that I'm owed.
So here's the thing. You have, and you brought this up earlier. So you have white people pushing against you, saying, you know what, maybe you can be a little successful, but you need to push back.
Yeah. You can't be too successful.
You got Black people pushing against you, saying, hey, wait a second, this guy might be too successful for us. We need to push him back too.
No, I mean to a degree,
right? Is it jealousy?
Yes, it has a lot to do with jealousy, and it also has a lot to do with, we call it the bougie. You know, when you get a little bougie, you know, you're better than your own people type of thing. And that is the attitude, and that is the argument. That's what we need to kind of get away from within our. And within our own society. And like I
That
said,
should never be
we
a thing.
need, but yes, it shouldn't.
Not,
But
no matter
in
what
order to
color
get,
you are.
I agree with, I agree that in order to get your stuff situated, you got to clean house first, right? But once we are able to, Black people are really good at multitasking. Let me just say that. We're excellent multitaskers. We can get our stuff done, but we can also get to that bag. You see what I'm saying? We can get to that success. We can do all of that. We're able to do that. Look, and if I'm wrong, there probably would never been anything about, slavery and all that stuff. It's just the way it was, right? Where that was the argument that when we came to this country, we were able to adapt to our circumstances, right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah, but you had no choice.
Yes, we didn't have any choice. But
I mean, if it's either dead or adapt, most people are going to pick. I mean, there are people.
Yeah.
I mean, we were talking about this earlier.
Yes, we were.
We were talking about this earlier, but most people are going to pick adapt, and that's a terrifying choice.
Exactly, it's a terrifying choice because we should not have to adapt to, what people think we should be doing. And that's just
for everybody.
That's exactly, and that's wrong. But to speak on the Black community, we shouldn't have to adapt to anything because what comfortable lives that everybody else is living is because of us. And we want what is due to us. What we worked hard for with what our people work for here. We just want what we're due.
Sure.
And
it's absolutely true that the initial, primarily the initial wealth of this country was provided on the broken backs of African slaves, without a shadow of a doubt. And especially because the majority of the wealth, as we're becoming a new nation, the majority of our wealth and established wealth as a total of states came out of the southern plantation states. It did not come out of the war-torn northern states. All that money had been wasted, well, not wasted, but it had been used up in order to fight a war against England. So the only established wealth that was left in this country was in the South, where there was plentiful labor that was free, that allowed for nothing but profit. And
that's
so
the key.
Yeah, and that was just one part of it. So then later what happened as well. So I mean, this it's just one step of a greater travesty. Then you've got gentrification in the post Jim Crow area, in which literally large portions of urban areas were financially decimated by putting people of Black and brown descent all together, and thus raising property value in other places, which was a continued increase of wealth among the whites at the detriment of the Black community. And redlining being part of that entire process, right? So now all of a sudden you have an entire neighborhood that's full of Black and brown people that have property values that are next to nothing, and you go 3 blocks away and you go into this nice neighborhood where you got the nice white people, and the property values are 4 times what you're seeing in the redlined areas. You're absolutely right about that. And here's where I want to make one more challenge to you, because you talk about this idea of coming up and earning value and wealth and building on your station in life. But I think in the status quo that we have right now, all of that has a ceiling. It has a glass ceiling, much like we've seen with women in this country, but also I believe with Blacks, even in today's new enlightenment that we have. And we do live in a new enlightenment. I know we do, because when I've been out to protest, which I've been out several times here in the Syracuse area to protest, there are a large number of white people that are there as well. So there is this enlightenment among whites to say, you know what, enough is enough. But I think even inside that enlightenment, there's still a major glass ceiling. There's only so much room that's going to be allowed. And so what I see going on right now, when you see this, and I'm gonna use some terminology that is incendiary, but I'm going to use it on purpose. When you see the war that's going on in the streets right now, the war that's going on in the streets of Portland, in Seattle, in Chicago, in Minneapolis, and when you see the way it's being received by our federal government, the way it's being reacted to by influential, wealthy white Americans who are terrified of the black man, we are on the precipice of a cultural revolution in a way that we haven't seen since the 1950s and 60s. And I do not want to step back. I don't want to pause this. I don't want to slow this up. I want to charge forward, and I want to see parts of this country burn, because you're never going to have what's given to you unless you take it. And I mean that as a whole society, not just black and brown people, because there are plenty of people that are like myself, and I know Mark feels the same way, that we feel like enough is enough. And it's time for the change to be taken, not asked for.
So here's the thing. Let me say this. Okay, you go. So I completely agree with what you're saying. So the thing is, so now what you have to understand is the way that the government is kind of seeing, and again, this is me saying, you can literally find a way to quiet the angry black man, right? You just got to oppress him a little bit more. That was pretty much what Jim Crow did, right? As soon as he pretty much starts to make more of a fuss than he needs to, you put your thumb on the back of his neck as hard as you could. But what is more dangerous? It's more dangerous to have a white ally, a person that have that privilege that can be able to speak for a black generation. Now, again, I say speak for a black community, but speak with them. Have them at the front lines with you. But in order for anything to get changed, to get changed or that way that you need to make that argument, you have to have people that have that platform. And sometimes for those platforms to get put out there, 9 times out of 10, they're white, because who's going to listen to who more than the other race or whatever it is? It's your fellow white man, right? So and I applaud you. Thank you for being out there at those rallies. But you also got to understand is that there is also black people out there that need those voices to be pushed forward, and they should be the ones that you should see on the front lines, because what happens is those arguments get lost in translation, but it also gets lost in the picture. Because at the end of the day, you'll just see a bunch of white people that's being showed on the media that they're arguing, and the argument will be that there's just a bunch of pissed off white people.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. Yep.
It muddies the water.
It muddies the water.
It's his job to come in and say something. It's my job to stand beside him and say, listen to him. He's right.
Yes.
Yep.
That's my job.
There has been a push, and I have seen the same push that you're talking about. Like, for example, Mitt Romney, former presidential candidate, senator from Arizona, I believe Arizona, right, or Nevada?
Utah.
Nevada.
So he was in
Utah, whatever.
So
correct, and he was marching with Black. Yeah, he was marching with Black Lives Matter, and there was a nice promotion photograph that was put out there to honor what he was doing. Not a single person of black skin around him at all. He was surrounded by white people. Then
that's where it gets lost in translation.
Well, then this past weekend, we've seen the stuff that's going on in Portland. You've got it started out with the moms that were locked, and then it was the veterans that were all locked together. And it's mostly, these are a wall of white people. Then, of course, the big sensational one that made national news was the naked yoga lady that sat in the middle of the street in Portland. Naked woman, which it's sexy, but again, it was a white woman. Why couldn't we have a beautiful black woman sitting naked in the middle of the street? I would have been much happier to see that. And you're absolutely right. It's becoming, I do want to say, I don't think it's intentional. But the movement is being co-opted, I think, by by opportunistic white people that are jumping into the fold. I went out there, but I never once spoke. I wasn't trying to take any leadership role. I did make a video that that I posted online and shared with the group that was marching here, but I didn't do that for promotion for myself. I just did it because it's a skill set I have, and let me use that and give them something that they can use for their promotional purposes. But no, that's exactly it. This is not a story, a narration for the white man. This is a story of revolution. This is a story of cultural change and a demand for that change. And that demand needs to come from the voice of Black and brown women and men.
The revolution will not be televised.
No. They're going to change the narrative. They're going to change the narrative to protect the establishment, ultimately, because when it comes specifically to the national news or state and local news, they still have to answer to their advertisers. And unfortunately, a lot of their advertisers are very cautious about what story gets told. Yeah.
But I will
say
that is changing big time. Big time.
I do see a lot of very pro Black Lives Matter and keep in mind, this whole movement is not owned by Black Lives Matter. It's just the catchphrase that we all use, and perhaps in the wrong, but regardless,
but just remember movement, the Black Lives Matter thing. We couldn't talk about that a couple years ago.
Right. Exactly.
That was just no. You can't talk about Black Lives Matter. No, right. It was just
You mentioned all lives matter. I want to say emphatically, and I'll say this 1,000 more times, but right now at this moment, if you're watching this,
not matter until
Black Lives
Matter.
But if you're still saying it, yes. If people are still saying it at this point now, we have all on both sides made it very clear that if you are saying all lives matter with intent, you are repeating a racial epitaph in itself right now. That is become a moniker of racism and a statement of your own misaligned idea of how the race balance is supposed to work. I'm so tired of seeing it. I see it a lot in the discourse on local media, Facebook pages, for example, and when in the comment section, which is always just a toxic place to go and look around. But that's what you see as a response. Oh, a wonderful story about something that's happening in a protest here in the city of Syracuse. And then there's always some Karen, talking about, from her small little track home in the suburbs, all lives matter, capital, exclamation.
Yep.
And it's
she's not wearing her mask either. So
no, correct. Right. Oh yeah, she's an anti-masker, and this is all a hoax, and it's all Bill Gates' fault, and blah 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 blah. Yeah.
Anyway, that's enough of that.
It's an argument to kind of get away from what we really need to be talking about.
All right, so
that is what it is.
And that's what I want to get to next. So from my point of view, Mark and I have talked about this. I know you've been watching the show for several weeks, but Mark and I have talked about this a number of times. I want your opinion. Where do you see this going from here in two ways, in the way you want it to go, and also where do you think it's ultimately going, and what do you think is going to be the catalyst for real change at this point?
So I hope that there will be more Black people out there protesting and doing what is necessary, voicing things that's going on. Again, speak on what's going on with Breonna Taylor, speak on what's going on with the other travesties that are happening in our neighborhoods and things like that, the ways that we are being oppressed, right? But I also hope and I pray that we are getting to the point where we can have that discussion the same way we can sit there and talk about Donald Trump and was the porn star's name?
Oh, which one? Which one?
Whatever. You see what I'm saying? How that can make headlines, right?
Yeah.
I hope that we can get to the point where we can petition our governments to have those conversations, to have those community meetings and things like that, where we can talk and we can get to a point where it's healing. I think this is what we're missing. We're just getting to a point where we just kind of tearing scabs open. We need to get to the point where we need to heal. And once we do that, then we can get to the point of growth and to of understanding and things like that. But as long as this disease is just festering, we have no hope for humanity, for society, for whatever you want to call it. And that speaks to the institutional racisms. That speaks to the racism within each other. The way we treat each other, just as humans. Once we can get away from that, we can heal. And I think that's what we need. We need to get to a point of healing. And the only way to get to that point of healing is to understand the things that are wrong and accept the things that are wrong, and to say to yourself, okay, now let's fix it. Once we can do that, I think we'll be good.
Yeah, I agree. Go ahead, Mark.
So fixing it. So George Floyd.
Yes.
Let's go back. So you keep bringing up Breonna Taylor.
Yes.
For rightly so.
The reason why.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think I know why.
Yes.
George Floyd. George Floyd was murdered.
Yes.
George Floyd's murderers were prosecuted.
Yes.
Was that appeasement to the black community? And look, we will do this. We will prosecute these people. We'll put them to justice. And then you go to the next person. And nothing happens.
So that's a good point that you brought up. Now, I don't care that they prosecuted them. Now, put them in that. Now, put them in jail.
Right, but it gets people to go.
It makes
people go away. They say, okay, they did their job. They prosecuted these people. We went away.
Yes.
But you got Breonna Taylor.
Yeah.
Nothing's happened. Nothing. I mean, very little.
Because they don't want to speak on that. The reason why. Okay, now, how society sees the black man, right? They see him less. What was it, 3/4, 3/5?
6/10,
3/5, right? Now imagine how they see a black woman.
Half of that.
Even probably less than that. And you know what? I commend every one of my black sisters that are out there on the front lines. Tamika Mallory,
Keisha.
Yeah, all of them that are
your best friend Keisha.
Yeah. Get it, Keisha. I commend all of them that are out there on the front lines and they're speaking for us, because there's no voice that is more powerful than a black woman, because they're going to get their point across. And as long as, and this is where we need to get out there, we need to protect them sisters, and we need to let them know that we have their backs, and to let them voice what they need to voice, because once they're out there, things get done. And that has always been shown within the black community. And the reason why I say that is because my mama, she raised me alone, and she managed to do a lot with 6 kids, and her voice was definitely heard within my family. If it wasn't the voice, it was the hand. If it wasn't the hand, it was the belt. She got a point across. We depicted her the boss. You see what I'm saying? But we need to understand that we need to fight for them just as much as we fight for the George Floyds, the Sean Bells, the Amadou Diallos, even the list.
20 years.
20 years.
100 years.
I remember writing about this in my high school newspaper. One of the things we were talking about was the injustices within the black community, and how the policing was happening. And this was of that 90s era where your buddy,
which one?
Biden, he had a lot to do with it, but that's another story that me and you need to talk about. But again, as long as we push that narrative forward and we protect the people that are out there on the front lines that are speaking for us, those voices of the unheard, I think we'll move forward. And yeah, that's it. That's how I kind of see it. and hopefully things will move where it needs to be.
Well, I share your sentiment 100% on that, and I want to thank you very much for coming on here tonight. I know you've been pining to get in here and tell your side of the story. And to be honest with you, as we progress through everything that's going on in the world right now, I know the COVID, I think, has elevated some of this, has kind of increased the frustrations and increased the passions and all that kind of stuff. But I think this is going to have a transformative effect, and as that change occurs, I'm looking forward to inviting you back on again and discuss anything that's come along. How do you feel about your visit tonight, Rashawn?
Oh, it was fun. I enjoyed it. You know,
he was holding my leg in the beginning. I think he was very, very nervous.
No, because
I got bruises down there. He was like, "Oh God!" No. I think he almost ran to the bathroom and didn't come back. You know what? Well, it's been fun. It's been good. It
has been good. So, for those of you that have been watching us for some time, obviously we're on YouTube tonight. We are no longer on Facebook. There's a number of reasons why we made that change. I'm only going to talk about it for a brief minute here, and then we're going to call it a night. But YouTube for us offers us the opportunity to better market the show to a broader audience because of keywording and the availability and use of YouTube. We have
Please subscribe.
Larger... Yes, well, I was going to get to that. Hang on to your ass over there.
I'm going to pander. I'm going to pander. Come on.
So this offers us the opportunity to have a broader possible audience as opposed to just our friends and family that have liked our Facebook page. So for those of you out there in YouTube land that have come across this channel tonight and watched through tonight's episode, thank you very much. I hope it's been informative for you. I hope you've enjoyed yourselves. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video if you have, shared it if you had. We had some wonderful insight from an incredibly articulate and intelligent man who just happens to be black. But his insight and his ideas and his history are invaluable. And I thank you very much, Rashawn, for coming on tonight. Again, we hope to have you on soon. You've been my friend since last December. You will be my friend forever. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Any closing thoughts, Marc?
I think you said it best. Please subscribe. I'm going to say it again. I'm going to say it again. Please subscribe. But, this has been a wonderful experience. He and I have been talking. I mean, we see each other almost every day. And I'm glad he got to come on here and express his feelings, emotions, and just have a voice. A voice is important. And every little bit, I take a little bit of symbolism in him and I sitting here. We're sitting here side by side. We're sitting here as friends, as colleagues, as compatriots. Mm-hmm. And I support everything he does. And in turn, he supports me as well. Now, that's it's equally important, and I think that's lost in this whole conversation is, what I support him as who he is. He supports me as well. And I think that I don't even know what to say about that. It's just a matter of us being equals. We are equals, and we will move forward as equals. And that's the way I see it for the rest of my life.
But what I want to do is I like to make sure everybody kind of leaves with some kind of homework. Do your history. And I say within the last 20 years, I just want you to go back and look at all of the lives that we are kind of lost, especially to police injustices, brutality, and just understand what their stories were. Don't look at what, like how or why they got killed. Just think about who we lost and what impact that they had on this world before they were taken away from us. And that's it. It's within 20 years, there's almost 200 people, black people. Just think on that. There's almost 200 black people, probably even more, that haven't had the same light put on them like the Breonna Taylors or the Ahmaud Arbery's or the George Floyd's. There's so many more voices and humans that have been taken away from us.
No voice.
That their voice is no longer there. Their kids they're growing up without having their parents there. Those people, they're the ones that can teach them the right the right or wrong things in their lives. They don't have that anymore, and that's it. That's all I want to say. Just go back, Google search. Google is your friend, and just Google in the past 20 years, how many Black people have been lost to police violence and injustices, and just look at their history. Just look at who they are as humans. And if you can't do that and kind of just grasp onto that within 30 minutes, I think you need to question yourself as a human, not as a race. I think you just need to question yourself as a human. Perfect. And that's it. I just want to leave it at that.
All right, guys. Once again, thank you for watching tonight's episode of The Gentleman and the Jerk. Subscribe to the channel. Share it with your friends. Like this video. It's going to help us get these more videos seen better in the future. Rashawn, thank you. Wakanda forever. Wakanda forever. You guys have a great night. We'll see you later.
You too. All right.